Hi there! It's been a while since my last YouTube video, and more specifically since my last cinema-related YouTube video. But a month ago I started Sons of Anarchy, and I feel like I got quite a few things to talk about. And by the way, I'm loving Charlie Hunnam, the actor that plays Jack Steller, the main protagonist of the show. He's done some very interesting work, most of which I managed to watch in the last couple of months. If you want some nice movies to watch starring him, you got... well, my favorite one would be Papillon, the latest one. It's a remake, but it's very good. It's good as hell. It talks about the real story of this French convict who's been framed for murder, and it's set in 1930, I think. It also stars Rami Malek, who I think is a very good actor. Then you got other movies like Triple Frontier, The Lost City of Z, Jungle Land, Crimson Peak. They're all really good. Of course, he's done some other work, but these are my favorite ones. Okay, now Sons of Anarchy. I will not make spoilers. At least I won't do any in the first part. However, I'll need to make some in the second part, but don't worry, I'll warn you when the time will come. I'm gonna be honest, I've taken this straight from Wikipedia, because I'm too lazy to come up with something that summarizes the plot without ruining anything for the people who haven't watched it. The show is set in Charming, this fictional city in California. Here there is the original charter of the Sons of Anarchy motorcycle club. This club is made up of several affiliates in various states of the USA and abroad, and founded in the 60s by 9 fellow soldiers from the Vietnam War. It engages in various illegal activities, especially arms trafficking thanks to its links with the IRA. Jack Steller, the protagonist, is the son of the founder John, and he is the vice president of Sam Crow, which is now chaired by his stepfather Clay Morrow, who would be the second husband of his mother Gemma, of Jax's mother Gemma. Jax is preparing to take the lead, trying to understand how to best manage the club his father left him as an inheritance. Something in him changes though when he finds John's diary, in which the man, devastated by the death of his second son Thomas, describes the progress of the generation that the club has undergone since Clay took over, and his deep regret at not being able to prevent his dream from turning into a simple illegal business, while also leaving disturbing clues to his death. While Jax's drug addict ex-wife, Wendy, makes him the father of little Abel, Tara Knowles returns to Charming, a neonatal doctor who had been Jax's girlfriend in her youth, with whom love seems to rekindle. I finished watching the last episode of the show today, and I already feel a hint of sadness knowing that I don't have any other episodes to watch, something that for me personally hasn't happened in a while with a TV series. I've grown very fond of the characters, and the darkness that the show has created in all 7 seasons contributed to this sadness. The show can really be heartbreaking at times. Although I feel that Sons of Anarchy has meant something for me and that it's left me something beyond just entertainment, at the same time I realize that many things about it didn't sit quite right with me. I guess you could say it's a love-hate relationship, the one I have with this show. There is this contrast between these extremely emotional and touching moments and these other quite questionable moments that oftentimes made me stop for a minute and say, okay, what the fuck is happening here? Let's get into it in a little more detail though. So first, Season 7, Episode 10. I cringed so hard at the introduction to this episode that I was just waiting for it to end. The introduction shows each romantic couple in the show having sex. A sex scene for each couple in the series, which would be 7 couples in total, plus a scene with a female character who's shown masturbating, for no particular reason. Maybe they did it to make it clear that she's got no romantic interest in any of the characters, but we already know that, so it doesn't really make sense. 2 whole minutes uselessly spent filming the characters' asses. And apart from a few exceptions, it really had no use, because most of the couples shown in this sequence are either already known to be together, or we just don't give a fuck about who they're with in terms of what's important to the story or to the character's development. And I know it sounds like I'm making a big deal out of nothing, and it didn't really bother me that much in the context of the whole show. I'm not one that hates sex scenes no matter what, they usually don't bother me in fact, but like everything else, I believe they should have a reason to exist. And sometimes, and I repeat sometimes, it feels like here some sex scenes are done just for the sake of showing the characters having sex, which I get it, it's good to attract people to the show, but I thought it would be something worth pointing out when talking about the cons. For the second example now, I'm gonna have to show you the scene I'm referring to make you understand what I'm talking about a little better.
Which one is it?
Are you an idiot? Take the picture.
Can't find the button, sorry.
Jesus. Here, let me do it.
Oh, shit, I told him not to sit on your bike.
Sorry. Look like a guy knows how to get his way. You do that to her lip?
Bitch has a mouth on her, you know.
Sure, I get it. So you like Harleys, huh?
Yeah, they look good, but I'm way into the slant bikes for their speed, you know.
Right. All right. Say cheese. Cheese. Nice.
That's before. Before?
You don't ever sit on another man's bike, asshole.
Holy shit.
Shut up, bitch! Little respect for the fair sex.
That's after. Where you headed?
No place special.
Me too.
I'm Susie.
Jax.
Now, would you, after having watched that scene, would you say that's realistic? 'Cause I wouldn't. That's what I want to talk about. Man, certain scenes seem to be the realization of the irrational dream of a 14-year-old boy. You know what I mean? This scene is from season 1, episode 4, and as you could see, Jax and Bobby find this couple next to their motorcycles that are parked outside. The guy, who is immediately presented to us as abusive to his girlfriend, sits on Jax's bike while the girl takes pictures of him. Once Jax and Bobby see them, Jax decides to make fun of the guy a bit by taking a picture of him on the bike himself. And soon after, he takes his helmet and slams it on his head, telling him never to sit on another man's bike again. And you know, that could still make sense considering the violent nature of Jax's personality. What doesn't make sense though is that at this point, the girl is pleasantly struck by what happened and smiles at Jax, which is just weird. It doesn't matter how abusive the guy is, these two thugs just hit your boyfriend, causing him to fall to the ground and bleed, and instead of, screaming or at least getting worried about it, you smile. And not only, you also accept to get on the bike with Jax, who doesn't even tell you where he's headed. Am I the only one who thinks this is fucking strange? It's a very surreal event, and very often, even if not with the same intensity, this same way of romanticizing, for lack of a better word, the outlaw life is present on various occasions. Sometimes, and it fucking hurts to say this because I love the show, but for this same reason, sometimes it feels like the typical stereotyped American action show. I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying that some adjustments could make it a lot better. Some also argue that the amount of violence and brutality that is very often represented is unrealistic if compared to the real American MC culture. And yeah, I'm no expert, but I highly doubt that a normal motorcycle gang, no matter how criminal it may be, finds itself so many times in the midst of machine gun shootouts, where all those people get decimated. However, the fact that it's unrealistic in those terms doesn't really bother me. Peaky Blinders is a show based on a street gang called Peaky Blinders that actually existed, but it's also heavily fictionalized, and a lot of stuff represented that didn't actually happen. Yet I don't see anyone complaining about that. Precisely for the reasons I talked about till now, it took me a long time to truly get hooked on the show, because initially I didn't have any kind of emotional attachment towards the characters, and all I saw in the series were these negative aspects that I just talked about. In fact, I initially didn't find the characters very appealing, and there's a reason. The evolutionary path that they go through from a moral point of view has its ups and downs. They go from doing something that makes them appear unpleasant in the eyes of the viewer, especially at the beginning when we still know nothing about them, to doing things that allow them to redeem themselves in a way, and regain trust both from us and from the other characters. Because this is what they are. The reason they find themselves here is that they were born and raised in criminal or violent environments. However, the more you go on with the episodes, the more you realize that, despite this, they try to live according to values that, although it's not always possible to respect, they still consider to be very important, such as family and brotherhood. The reason why I didn't feel any connection with them at the beginning was therefore because I still saw only the bad in them, and I didn't understand why I would have to put up with 7 seasons of events that saw as protagonists these individuals who I did not respect in the least. As the show progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that the context in which they live is one of revenge, of aggressiveness and delinquency. So, on one hand, in the midst of this series of events with which the viewer struggles to identify, because hopefully for normal people problems related to arms trafficking are not that relatable, on the other hand, those emotional and intimate elements with which it is easy to sympathize with, such as pain, fragility, love, vulnerability, and the sense of protection towards family, are dealt with in a very delicate way. Now, I've previously talked about how the show sometimes has its lows when it comes to portraying a realistic image of the biker gang lifestyle, and this sometimes leads to a romanticization of it. It's fair to say, though, that most times when this happens, it's pretty much obvious that it's got a comical purpose. Take the example from before. It was likely meant to be a quirky and funny scene. The problem is that it was poorly written and it just came off as weird. What I'm trying to say here is that, yeah, it can be cringe at times, but overall the message that it wants to send is not that this lifestyle is correct and is characteristic of a meaningful existence, but rather the opposite. The characters often show the contrast of emotions present in their minds. Jax, for example, is constantly torn between 2 conflicting parts of himself. The first is the person he has become. The second is the person he knows he must be for his and his family's sake. However, it's not easy given that he was raised and educated in the club environment to make the second prevail over the first, or even to just find a compromise between the two. This is, in short, the moral dilemma that will regularly plague the protagonist throughout the series. Furthermore, during the course of the 7 seasons, each individual character experiences in one way or another terrible tragedies that progressively wear out the soul of each of them, and kind of dehumanize them more and more, thus showing the long-term impact that this life has on their psyche. So yeah, a TV series that shows all this surely doesn't want to send the message that leading this kind of life is any good. Okay, as for the considerations I had to do without the need for spoilers, I think I'm done. So let's move on to the spoiler part, where I will look at more specific examples to elaborate further arguments. If you haven't watched Sons of Anarchy, proceed at your own risk. Know that once you spoil certain events and intend to watch it, you have ruined most of the magic of the series. However, if you're undecided on whether to watch it or not, my first suggestion would be for you to watch it, because I've appreciated it a lot. But at the same time, I realized that not only it's very long, but also it's not possible to underestimate certain serious weaknesses that it presents. Let's talk about Juice, but more specifically the plot hole in Juice's narrative arc, which unfortunately is not the only one in the series, but it's certainly the one that upset me the most. In the club, since its beginning, apparently there is an unwritten rule that members must not be black, which is something that I did not know before season 3 episode 4, in which Eli Roosevelt, Sheriff of Charming, discovers that Juice's father is African American and blackmails him, threatening to tell this to the club unless he decides to betray the Sons and collaborate with the feds. Roosevelt paints a very pessimistic picture of the situation. He tells Juice that if the club ever found out about his father, they would throw him out, and with any luck, they might leave him alive. And Juice seems to be totally buying this story, taking everything he says for granted, assuming that this would happen for sure, going so far as to share incriminating information about the Sons, about the club, with the feds. But it makes absolutely no sense at all. So far, the viewer has had no hint of this hypothetical repulsion that the club should have towards the idea of a black member. In fact, we often see them teaming up with other motorcycle gangs with black people. So why should Juice be so worried about the club finding out enough to become a spy? Then, even if he had this doubt, he could very well somehow indirectly test the waters and try to understand if this rule was actually still valid. As I'm editing this, I realized that I forgot to say something very important for the point I'm making. And that would be that eventually it does turn out that in fact the rule isn't still valid, and having a black member in the club isn't that big of a deal for the Sons. But unfortunately, when Juice finds this out, it's already too late, because he's already shared too much information with the feds. So this event is very important for everything that happens afterwards, because Juice's betrayal leads to a whole chain of subsequent events that have enormous relevance in the story and in the ending. And the fact that all these events are based on something so weak and not very believable for the viewer is really too bad. Okay, now let's talk about her. I also tried to search on the internet who this woman was. I said maybe I was distracted when they introduced her as a character, or I missed something. But no! We see this character, a homeless woman, appear from time to time in some episodes. And by appear, I mean literally everywhere. We see her in Charming, but not only. In the 3rd season, for example, when the club is in Belfast looking for Abel, we even see her in Belfast, as if she had followed them. When she makes these appearances, she put the viewer in doubt. It seems that she's got nothing to do with the protagonist, but at the same time we see that she follows them wherever they go. In fact, she's represented with the spiritual aura as if she were to symbolize something. Therefore, the only explanations there are regarding her identity are the theories created by the fans that would either see her as the reincarnation of Brooke's mother, killed by John Teller's motorcycle accident, or they would see her as a divine entity of some sort, since in the last episode she's shown eating bread and wine, thus symbolizing the figure of Christ. Now, I already don't like when writers use the free interpretation thing in their scripts, because to me it just feels lazy. And if on top of that, the thing you leave to free interpretation is the identity of a character who behaves like a godlike figure, despite being inside a world so real and concrete, which until now has been lacking any kind of magical or divine element, then that's exactly where you lose me. However, I realize that the observation I'm making is purely subjective, and that there may very well be people who instead appreciate this mystery that has been created. It makes sense, in fact, the idea of adding an element of religious nature to the series, as quite often the internal conflict of the characters with their faith in God is very well present. But the idea of the homeless woman doesn't sit right with me. It felt disconnected with everything else. But again, this is a subjective consideration. I'm sorry though to make it seem like I got nothing positive to say about the series, because it's totally the opposite. Indeed, as I have already said, despite all the negative things that I have listed, I continue to feel very fond of it. As I have already pointed out, I believe that the characters are the real strength of Sons of Anarchy, but in particular I would like to talk about the evolution of the character of Tara, consisting of several phases. Initially, her and Gemma couldn't stand each other, and she was very unwilling to be involved in the life in which she knew that inevitably Jax would have dragged her in. As the series progresses, Tara gets closer and closer to Jax, and as a result attempts to understand his lifestyle, while also reconciling with Gemma. However, after the 3-year sentence that Jax is forced to serve in prison, it's clear that they both want to leave Charming, abandon the life that the club forces them to have, and devote themselves to their family. However, Jax, after having discovered the letters and everything that happened with Clay and his father, decides to let go of these plans and rather stay close to the club, thus also forcing Tara to stay in Charming. So we can see this sort of emotional shift that takes place in her. She becomes increasingly colder and detached towards everyone but her own children. And this is when she realizes that if she wants to take away her children from Charming's hell and protect them from becoming like their father, she has to act on her own. So she secretly starts the process to get a divorce and escape from there. However, she never really manages to do that, but rather she gets killed by Gemma before being able to get anywhere. It's so interesting because during this whole final phase of Tara's narrative arc, where it's basically her against everyone else, I always rooted for her, despite the fact that she was also going against Jax, whom, since that moment, I had always appreciated. So really, hats off to the show, cause it's not easy to make you hate the protagonist you've always loved, just to make you love him again in the next season. Her tragic death was the event that led Jax to hit rock bottom, and that also gave life to the 7th season, which, although I think it may be a little stretched, ended with a beautiful and worthy series finale.